Punk Revolution, and today we're reviewing Black Midi. Black Midi, the most hyped up freaking rock band of my lifetime. I've been listening and following to music for a long time, and I don't think I've ever seen a band that plays rock music, experimental rock, post-punk, progressive rock, whatever you want to call it, avant-garde, whatever. I've never seen a band that plays in those genres get nearly as much hype as I've seen Black Midi, a ton of hype. Like, literally every single time that Black Midi releases an album, it's like, everybody, Black Midi's releasing an album, we're getting another freaking masterpiece. And you know what? As someone who loves post-punk and as someone who loves experimental rock and someone who loves progressive rock, I think it's kind of interesting. It's an interesting phenomenon that these genres are kind of have gotten, like, you know, very trendy. But I've never really bought into the Black Midi hype train as much. I thought Schlagenheim, their debut, was pretty cool, although kind of not executed so well. Cavalcade, I also thought was cool, but also it's just like an avant-prog album. I listen to a lot of those. There's some that come out and literally no one listens to them at all, but whatever, let's just, you know, we got the third album, Hellfire, and again, Black Midi hype train to the max. Everyone's freaking out about this being a masterpiece, and I'm like, here we go again. I'm really not a Black Midi hater. I like Cavalcade. I don't have any skin in the game one way or the other. If they release a great album, I'm happy. If they don't, I'm just confused why the hype is still so high. So let's go ahead and start by taking a look at the album cover, and we can dig into the music. This is a pretty dope album artwork. I like that shade of pink that they chose. I think the colors are just really cool. It's very kind of like a combination of kind of like body horror, kind of like messed up weird creatures in there, but then it's also kind of like cyberpunky, very kind of futuristic in a weird way. It's very contemporary, very trendy, frankly. Lots of contemporary artists on Instagram are exploring these kind of themes of like technology and gore. But you know, it's even though it's trendy, it's still cool. And I think it kind of fits Black Midi's music. It does actually remind me a decent amount of the Cavalcade cover, which is also kind of just a lot of stuff going on, very colorful, somewhat similar color schemes. And you know, I think that's actually a really clever album artwork, because this album artwork, it kind of feels somewhat like a continuation of the Cavalcade artwork universe. I feel like musically also this album is definitely going to be, I sound like the production is kind of similar. A lot of the riffs they're using are very similar in the sense that they're jazz rock and progressive rock played with like a lot of speed and lots of like jamming on one riff for a lot of the song. Definitely more in line with the progressive rock and avant-prog Black Midi explored in Cavalcade compared to like the post-hardcore kind of noise rock emo Black Midi was kind of dabbling in Schlagenheim. I don't know if they're ever going to go back to that, but I will say Hellfire actually does have a little bit more post-punk riffing going on, and I think at times that's like really to their advantage, because post-punk riffing is like really catchy, just like like, you know, that kind of angular post-punk that's like a little bit dancey. They're incorporating that into Welcome to Hell. It's really cool with some kind of cool change-ups, lots of just great riffing throughout there, and the drummer is just fantastic. Even though the guitar might be just playing a pretty simple kind of dancey post-punk riff, the drum is going to be filling up a lot of space as well. I think that's just their best song on the album, probably one of their best songs in their discography, frankly, and I think it's a really cool contrast also to the first few songs on the album that were a little bit more kind of directly in line with avant-prog, brutal prog, progressive rock. Sugar Sue, for example, is kind of just jamming a lot around this like one kind of scale that's like it's very jazzy, very, you know, progressive rock, and I think it's pretty cool. I like the speed of it. I don't really necessarily find that creative. I just kind of feels like they're kind of like stuck in there, and then maybe they'll kind of just like break it up with like a little bit of like you know, some like kind of like just hitting random dissonant chords. And I feel like the production, they're just kind of slathering a lot of like just kind of banging on the pianos or just horns or just additional guitars layered on there. It does kind of feel like the songwriting here, you know, just compared to like, you know, listening to John L., the way that song kind of gradually builds up and then speeds up and then these weird pauses. John L. off their album Cavalcade just kind of feels like everything has a little bit more of a purpose, while on this album everything kind of just feels like, yes, we have this cool riff that we're playing really fast, but we're not really able to go anywhere that interesting with it, and we're kind of stuck with it, but we're gonna put a lot of stuff in the production on top of it, and we're gonna have rambling on top of it, which, oh my goodness, the vocalist still rambling. I mean, I feel like on Cavalcade, the vocalist was able to just kind kind of at least give a little bit more space for the interesting instrumentation. In Hellfire, I just feel like it's just non-stop rambling about just kind of abstract lyrics about gonorrhea and war or whatever. Okay, haha. It's like kind of humorous, and it's like, I guess I've just never really liked humor that much in progressive rock and art rock. I mean, obviously, you know, if the Mother's Invention does like a stupid little joke here and there, it's fine. I find art that's like more serious and more dramatic and more like genuinely emotional to be more compelling than kind of like comedy and humor. I think Ween's funny when they do it, but Ween's making music that's not supposed to be, you know, super like pretentious or whatever. This feels like it's trying really hard to be kind of avant-garde, and when you start kind of putting this kind of wacky humor in it, it's like, okay, that's fine. But then when they do try to get emotional, we hit the song Still, and it's like, the song Still it just sucks. Like, this is everything wrong with Black Midi in a nutshell. Please listen to this song alone and just listen to it. Just pretend it's not Black Midi. Just take the hype out for a second. It's like a country song for the first half with really pitchy and like awkwardly mixed vocals, like he's like whispering a little, kind of quiet singing, and it just, the song is so busy because they're just trying to fill the album up with so many it's like a mediocre country song that they have to just kind of like stack a bunch of stuff on top to try to make it interesting. So when you try to mix the quiet vocals in, it just kind of sounds pitchy and weird, and like it's always like trying to be like psychedelic dream pop or something. And then that's kind of I mean, it's just so long, it just keeps going on. Nothing interesting is happening. There's no emotional connection. He sounds like a freaking cartoon character singing opera. It's really cringe. And then the second half of Still, they put in this ambient section, which is pretty, but it's like, oh my goodness, we just had all this momentum built up with Welcome to Hell, where we're finally kind of catching some speed. The first half of this album actually does have a decent amount of speed going on in it, and that kind of feels a little cohesive with the rambling vocals, but then we get to Still, it's just like, it's just like the momentum of the album just dies. And this is the problem with Black Midi. It's like, it's like, whoa, what if we wrote a brutal prog song, and then afterwards we put a country song, and then halfway through the country song we put an ambient song? And like, music nerds might be like, yo, that's the most creative thing ever. That's so genius to do that. That's such a plot twist. And I'm just here like, that might be a cool idea, but you gotta listen and use your ears. Does this song actually sound good? Does it actually make the album sound good? You might have this concept in your head that it's gonna create a cool dynamic where you get a slow moment to slow down and take a breather, and the dynamics are gonna be epic, and the momentum change is gonna be epic. But you have to listen and like think. And I think a lot of the times they're not really writing very interesting stuff. You might have one riff that's like, and it's like, okay, that just feels like a weaker version of a song off Cavalcade, and you're just filling up the space, like, a lot. Like, this, I mean, I already had an issue in Cavalcade where it felt like they were compensating for kind of songwriting that was like a little bit stuck in the mud with like overproducing by kind of adding a lot of pianos and a bunch of like strings and stuff. This album, they take it to like way the next step. It just feels like Cavalcade with much less compelling songwriting and a lot more compensating with like a lot of production choices that just are over, like, it's like you're yes, cool, oh wow, cool, you're banging dissonant chords on a piano, wow. I mean, I can listen to Ground Zero, I can listen to Mothers of Invention, I can listen to Faust, I can listen to like, I mean, there's a whole Henry Cowell, there's a whole history of decades of music that's already done this, and I can only imagine that this is going to blow your mind if you've never heard that before, because it's just literally that, just not executed as well. I mean, Mother of Invention's discography is huge. I can listen to and I don't even like Mothers of Invention that much. I do like them a lot, but like, I'm not saying like, oh, Mothers of Invention are freaking gods. If you dare try to do anything that's similar to them, you're just a flawed, uncreative musician. And I don't believe that. I just feel like it's just not as good. That's all there is to it. I don't understand the hype at all. I really don't. I mean, I think this band literally has just hit the lottery in terms of how they exist in the consciousness of the indie music world as a band that are complete geniuses, incredibly talented, who are just wacky and not afraid to do anything. That's great, but there's like a lot of bands who are doing that. There's a lot of bands, like, what's that, Stab Scotch? They just released an album that was like way more experimental than this, and literally no one was talking about it. I didn't even review it, but you should maybe go check out that. I don't know. Point is, just taking the context of the hype out of this band, just listening to this album, it's just poorly done. First half is pretty good. Some cool, fun, catchy riffs. Then you get Still, which is like, I think, an awful song. And then you get an interlude. It's like, why are we having all these corny interludes? And then you get The Race Is About to Begin, which is, you know, again, like the first half is great. Like, okay, cool, we're finally picking up a momentum after the Still and the freaking interlude, which was just like a waste of time. That was a really long waste of time. And then the second half of The Race Is About to Begin, it just kind of slows down again with this corny, kind of like very opera kind of singing. And it's like, what the heck is going on? Why are we still doing this? I feel like he's trying to be like Nick Cave or like Tim Buckley, doing this very dramatic singing with this kind of experimental music going on behind you. But it just feels like, dude, I'm not buying the emotion when just a second ago you were doing this like pseudo-psychotic, you know, rambling, pretending that you're crazy and like making stupid jokes, and then you're, you know, doing like this opera emotional singing. I'm not finding any emotion from it. I feel like a lot of the articulation is just so overdone and just so forced. It just feels very forced. And that, you know, that's the weird thing, is like, I feel like throughout this whole band's discography, the vocals have always been like the weakest link. But at least in Cavalcade, I feel like the instrumentation was so good, and the vocalist was able to give enough space to the instrumentation that it was okay. I think in Hellfire, the instrumentation is actually pretty weak. Like, if this was just an instrumental album, I would be pretty unthrilled by it. Not the most interesting riffs, not the most interesting developments of the riffs, and I think, like I said, I feel like, again, they're compensating by just doing too much with the production. It's weird, like the songwriting both got less creative and less experimental, but the production got more like, let's just stack a bunch of stuff on it to try to compensate. It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. In the second half of this album, yes, you got that horrible middle section of the album that just completely drops all the momentum. But the second half of this album, like, I just feel like it's just very similar to the first half, but just less compelling riffs, less compelling songwriting, less compelling song direction. And I advise you to listen to, and I'm not, you know, I can make a whole list of bands that I think do these genres better. I could do that, but just so I don't come off as a Black Midi hater, listen to Cavalcade, listen to John L. Listen to how that song, that riff, you know, it's got like that tension, and then there's like a pause. And then it speeds up. It's like, it's got like this nice tension and release. This album is completely missing any of that. It just feels a lot more like, just like they're just kind of playing these okay riffs. I don't know. It just, I'm shocked. I can only, like, you know, I've always been a little confused by the Black Midi hype, like I've said. But this is the first Black Midi album that I think is actually straight up like pretty bad. Like bad. You know, like before I thought, oh, yeah, Black Midis, they're pretty good. They're not amazing. This album I think actually goes into the territory where I think it's, besides a few songs and moments here, I think this is a pretty like mediocre, below average album in this genre. And if this album also continues to get hype as much as their previous Black Midi albums, then I'm going to be really confused. So, yeah, I don't know. I just really do not like this album. I try to detach from the superficial kind of stuff about music when it comes to like what's trendy, what's not trendy. Black Midi is obviously very trendy right now. I'm inclined to be like a contrarian who doesn't like trendy stuff. I really think if I just completely erase all that, I just really think this is just completely just like not a very good album. Not very memorable. I would much rather listen to Cavalcade, which is kind of doing the same genres. I just think a lot better executed. So, I don't know, maybe they were, you know, rushing to put a lot more stuff out because of pressure from the record labels, or I don't know what the heck was going on. You know, I feel like they were trying to bring in a little bit more post-punky, kind of punky speed and aggression into it. I just don't think it's a very good album. So I'm giving this a 5.5 out of 10. That's really my honest opinion. I'm not exaggerating. This is how I really feel. I'm curious to see how this plays out, because I really believe that even Pitchfork and Anthony Fantano and other music critics are gonna have to acknowledge that this is a step down from their previous two albums. Like, that's even the biggest Black Midi hype train, you know, people who, I don't know, never have listened to progressive rock and think that Black Midi is like the most genius thing of all time. I think even those people have to, once, maybe in a few weeks, once the hype has died down, gonna have to acknowledge that this is Black Midi's weakest. So, I don't know. Let me know what you think. That's all I have to say. Thanks so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe. If you're a Black Midi fan, don't be mad at me. maybe go listen to better music. Oh, just kidding. Whatever, sorry. Oh my god, what if we put a country song? Oh my god, what if we did an ambient section? What if it sounded bad? Well, no one will notice. Because we're Black Midi and everyone always thinks that everything we touch is amazing. Punk Revolution now!